Hi everyone, good to see you all again. We're here for another episode with Be It TV. Our first episode, which is actually about film, about entertainment, about the entertainment industry. And we're going to look into the X-Men universe and just talk about it. Just talk about it, what we like about it, what we don't like, our views, our opinions, and just see if there's anything inspiring about the X-Men 2 that we can draw from and compare to real life. So I'm here with my good friend Kwame. It's his first time on the show. He's also a big X-Men geek like me, and we're just gonna go into it together. But I'll let Kwame introduce himself and say hi. It's his first time, and then we'll go straight into the video for you guys.
Thank you, man. So yeah, my name's Kwame, as you said. We know each other from church.
Yeah.
Meet together every week, chat, chop up life and that. But a little bit about myself, just specifically. So, South London, born and bred. Lived here my whole life, pretty much. Apart from university, went up to York. But then had to come back to London as quick as I could.
You weren't feeling the York life.
I like the kind of small town vibe of it for a bit.
You're on the bushes.
It was my wilderness season. Back to the big city. But yeah, so London, and I am married. I work as a criminal barrister, so I'm in court pretty much every day, representing clients. I do some prosecution as well, mostly defense, but a whole range of criminal offenses. So I see some crazy stuff on a daily basis.
Nice, man. But more stories to come from Kwame about his job.
More stories.
Look at me, his own podcast. No, it's good to have you, man. It's good to have Thank on the show. Again, guys, me and Kwame, we love entertainment, we love film, we love sports, and we just love talking about it, So why not have a podcast today about one of our favorite comic book properties, which is the X-Men series. Me personally, X-Men is my favorite comic book property is probably the Batman.
Okay.
But in terms of Marvel, X-Men is my personal favorite. I think it has great characters, and we'll speak about in more detail about sort of why I like X-Men and things. But my personal favorite is X-Men. Is it the same with you, or are you more of a Iron Man, Spider-Man guy?
So I grew up on X-Men,
right?
So I think it probably. I think I agree. I think back to the X-Men Evolution,
the cartoon
series. That was childhood, like 101. It's always gonna have a special place in my heart because that was also the first one that we saw on the big screen done properly. Like, thinking back to the first X-Men films in the early 2000s. And that was proper introduction to superhero films.
That was kind of before Batman Begins, and that kind of kicked off the genre in the film world.
And the thing, so we had the earlier Superman films, like the Christopher Reeves and all of that, and then you had the early Batman films, like I think George Clooney even had his one,
Batman and Robin,
But again, maybe I'll put the Christopher Reeves one to one side, but generally speaking, they felt a bit more gimmicky, and it was always like kind of fun and catchphrase and this and that. But when the X-Men films came out, it was like, no, we're taking these films seriously.
Yeah, exactly.
And I must have been maybe 6 or 7 when the first X-Men came out. But
in 2000, the very first one.
2000. Not 2001.
I think it was 2000, the first one.
2000,
Yeah.
5 years old. But I remember that so clearly.
That changed the whole genre. I think it created some seriousness. You could take comic books seriously for the first time.
And the most memorable Christmas present, it wasn't even mine, it was my older brother's, but it was Wolverine. It was quite like a big figurine. And like you press the button and like it makes a noise and the claws come out. It was his basically like both of us.
Oh man. And that's when you fell in love with X-Men. Yeah, man. Yeah, I think it's a great definitely a great franchise. I think for me, story-wise, I think is in terms of storytelling, I think is the best one in terms of all the Marvel on the Marvel side of things, and just story in general. I think it's good.
And the difficulty is though, like, and again, without getting into all of the sort of the weeds of television and film companies and everything, because it was owned by Fox before and not by like Disney, which the mainstream MCU is part of. They did a good job on some aspects of it. So I think about X-Men and then X2, the second one when it was dealing with Stryker and everything.
Oh, that was brilliant.
When we get to like The Last Stand and then some of the ones that follow after that, it felt like it was just a bit of a Hollywood churn.
It started to turn into like an action, sort of the mainstream blockbuster. Yeah,
and it lost a little bit of what made it really special and unique. And obviously the MCU's come along, and then they've done the Avengers, like especially like you look at the not the multiverse saga, but the Infinity saga. So up to Thanos, like, they did that so exceptionally well.
Oh, that was 10 out of 10.
Man, honestly,
we've got to do some reviews on that too.
Yeah. So
yeah.
What they've done is they've taken the genre up to an even greater level, like where it's much more comic book accurate, but it's still it's just entertaining and it's high quality.
Yeah.
The early X-Men films, I think they were entertaining, high quality, but they weren't always comic book accurate. You know, they were focused more on let's make great films.
Yeah.
And then the comics kind of just are supporting material that feeds into that.
Yeah.
So look, I think X-Men holds a special place in my heart because it was the first that really like sort of struck my attention. But what the MCU was able to do, mainly with the Infinity Saga, I think that's the gold standard in my view. But yeah.
No, I agree because I think the thing is with because you had Bryan Singer do X-Men 1, 2, Days of Future Past as well.
Yeah.
And I think even from a director standpoint, my favorite X-Men film was personally First Class. I think First Class is. I think First Class. Okay. We'll get to that in a bit more, but detail. But I think his style, his sort of storytelling style is very much, you know, let's look at the nuances, the drama, the characters. And then we can just pick up parts without making it too. I think when it's make it more relatable to the real world, to real people, you know, to real situations. Hence why I think the tone was a bit different. Whereas if you look at like the Avengers movies, they're a lot more comic booky, but they still have the sort of a grounded story in a way. So I think it's just finding that balance. And then looking at obviously Christopher Nolan's Batman film, same thing, very grounded, not comic book accurate. Because even if you look at like Bane, he did not look like he did in the comics, you know. Bane, even Catwoman, she had the binoculars. She didn't have the actual cat suit. So I think it's just down to just the way stories are told, right? And I think certain stories resonate. And I think comic books are a hard one to tackle because I think the fan base are very passionate about. We want things to look like the comic books. You want like even with Wolverine's suit, you saw in Deadpool Wolverine, he had the actual yellow suit, but then they never made fun of it. He looked said he actually looks like a superhero now. It's like. Yeah, but then whereas in the Bryan Singer films, he was just wearing the black leather outfit. But it was just...
And there's even a gag in that film where I think Wolverine's speaking to Cyclops, they're in the plane.
Yeah.
He says something to him like, why are we wearing these suits? He's like, what do you think we're going to wear? Yellow and So they were...
you should be wearing that, but they were pushing. Yeah. They were making fun of what they should be wearing.
Exactly.
To kind of fit that tone of film. So I think that's brilliant. But I'll go straight into it. I think straight into some points that I definitely wanted to look into. In my opinion, right, I think with X-Men is about, obviously you have the mutants, right? You've got the mutants who are sort of astronized and sort of pushed to the margins of society by the humans. For me personally, that's always been the most interesting. I think more from the films. That aspect of outsiders, people who don't fit in, discrimination, especially being like black, right? Looking at like, okay, you know, how do you deal with life in that situation? I think the mutants kind of are a good representation of that, which is what I think makes it interesting.
And even just jumping off the back of that, when the X-Men was created, it was in the 60s. And it was around the civil rights
during the movement
time.
Yeah.
So when Stan Lee and the other writers were coming together, it was their intention to use this as a platform to speak about the way that we can actually live together and coexist as people with such difference between us.
Exactly.
So it's not even just like a sort of random analogy, but it's by design that the X-Men, you know, are approached that way.
Yeah, and I think even going into that deeper, a good point you made was that the fact X-Men was made in the 60s during the civil rights movement, where you had the blacks and whites and the whole movement. But I think even looking more into Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and then you've got Professor X and Magneto, who sort of represent Martin Luther King, who's more of a peacemaker, this kind of
non-violent approach.
Yeah, non-violent approach. Where Magneto's like, let's fight back. Let's kind of, you know, use an aggressive approach. Let's rise above with violence. So. And I think that's what, for me personally, that's what drew me to X. Like, I think what made me more like, that's a very intelligent way of because comic books, people think, oh, comic books are just silly, and you got all these speech bubbles, and it's silliness. There's no nuance to it. But I think X-Men was one of the first ones that actually used, I think, a deep life event that was happening at the time, and then translating that into entertainment, and doing it very well. I think that's very
100%. And at the end of the day, it's art and it's literature, and writers often use those things to speak to issues that people are facing in society in so many different ways. The music now, for example, like even looking at the Black Lives Matter movement that was happening sort of in the early 2020s, like all of the music that was coming out at that time, Kendrick Lamar's Damn album, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
How that spoke to issues at that time. So art has always been able to speak into those kind of social spaces, and comic books are no different.
Definitely. I think what's even more interesting about X-Men is, like, just like you were saying, that art can speak to sort of a current event or bring something to light. What's really interesting about X-Men is that whole, even though it was sort of inspired by the civil rights movement, that element of discrimination or feeling like an outsider, you don't fit in, it's kind of applied to different generations. Like what we're in 2024 now, right? X-Men came out 60 years ago, but still, there's still kind of, I think there is people who maybe have a different sexual preference. People have a different, people who are pushed out, people who don't feel like they fit in. Marginalized generally. I think that's something that will always happen, right? I think society always. So I think X-Men is a timeless comic book that I think people will always be able to relate to.
No, 100%, man. And I think it's like wherever society is, whatever country it is, whatever culture, like there's gonna be some kind of mainstream and then people that are left out on the margins. And well, you could even make the argument nowadays that like sexual preference maybe isn't even a thing that's on the margins anymore.
Yeah, it's mainstream now.
It is mainstream.
Yeah, so you see the outsiders are the ones who who want the normal way of life. Yeah, I would say normal way of life. Well, no, I'm not going to discriminate anyone, but I think maybe the ones who want that straightforward,
more traditional
lifestyle
is actually marginalized.
Are being pushed out by the
And
I think that's a powerful thing you mentioned, because I think that society now, we are more kind of pushing boundaries. We're doing things that are not normal, or things that we're kind of more rebellious now, right?
The norm is to like invert norms.
Yeah,
that is mainstream.
Exactly. Because now nothing's weird. You look at something like 20 years ago, you think that's weird. Why would you do that?
For real.
But now you see even the way, like I was out doing some shopping a few weeks ago. I go into the men's section, and there were tops with glitter all over them. I'm thinking, hold on, am I in the women's section or the men's section? Yeah, and I'm just like, wait, hold on a second. But no, it's like, this is the way men dress. It's like, it's all, I've seen men in skirts. I've seen men wear dresses. I'm like, I think that's what it is becoming, what's normal or not normal is starting to change. And I think that's, so I think, the whole idea of what an outsider is also with that changes, because I think now people maybe want the normal way of life. They want because even now with even kids in school, right, they're being taught that you can pick your gender, you can do all this stuff, right? And I think even that, like 20 years ago, that's absurd, right?
Absolutely unheard of entirely. But so there's something called the Overton window, and and if you think about it as like a visual analogy, it's the way that we view normal and acceptable in society can shift, and it almost happens without you recognizing it. So to take like a really obvious example, which is like Donald Trump, when he first came into politics, the things that he was saying were absolutely outrageous.
Great point.
People were thinking there's no way that someone like that could be the president. But you fast forward, a couple of years into his campaign, he's been president, now he comes back. He says some weird, outrageous stuff. And it's not that we accept it, but it's been normalized. So what that means is the Overton window has shifted, and you can apply that to so many different things as well. As we're saying, like what gets taught in schools, etc. The Overton window has shifted such that things that would just be outrageous, even 10 years ago, are just normal parlance and normal conversation nowadays.
That's a great point, because I think Donald Trump's a great example, because when I was at university, we studied, it was a topic called modernity, post-modernity, kind of looking at what's modern, what's not modern, what is post-modernity. One thing we looked at was Donald Trump, how he kind of personifies post-modernity, kind of the evolution, right? Because when you think about it, I think the thing that what makes Donald Trump because think about it, when you're running for president, you're kind of selling. It's kind of like you're selling yourself to people as to why I should be president. And I think he wasn't a politician. He wasn't political. He was just a guy speaking his opinion. And I think people could relate to him. Like, hey, look, this guy's doing something outrageous. He's doing all this stuff. And I feel we don't want a politician anymore. We want just a normal guy who speaks the truth. And I think whether or not you agree with his views or not, I think that is what made him stand out from the likes of Hillary Clinton or who is it now, Kamala Harris or Obama. He wasn't maybe that stereotypical political figure. And people were tired of the normal politician. They wanted something else. And that's what happened.
And I think what's even more interesting about that is how that Overton window shift in America and maybe in other parts of the world hasn't really hit the UK yet. So, for example, we've got maybe our equivalent is like a Nigel Farage. He's the one who's head of Reform UK, formerly head of UKIP. And he has some other party in the middle, but he is the kind of Donald Trump figure in that his approach is, I'm speaking for the everyday person, I'm cutting the rubbish, I'm just getting straight to the point. These are the issues that are facing us. You might not like how it sounds, but this is what it is. We don't really look for that in the UK. Our Overton window is
much more narrow.
It is, and it doesn't encompass that kind of approach, which also shows that the type of culture that you're part of determines how quickly something is going to shift and in which direction things are going to shift towards.
It's crazy you say that, man, because I was a victim. Because obviously what happened with me, obviously I grew up in the US and Canada. So I remember I moved back to the UK. This was 10 years ago. Fashion sense in the US and Canada is very different, right? So I'll tell you a funny story. So I come to the UK, I have my Canadian and American style. So I had an ex-girlfriend at the time, so I'm obviously gonna meet a girl, I was dressing up, wore our best clothes. We meet up, and she looks at me, she's like, "What are you wearing?" And I'm wearing white trousers, right? You know, in America they like the white shiny trousers. You know, I'm wearing my best clothes. I'm glowing, right? She goes, "Take those off. You look like an angel." You know, and I'm just like, "What?" I'm thinking, "Are you kidding me, bro?" And it was just like, it's just kind of like. At the time, I was like, "Well, this is cool. You know, this is swag. I got swag. What do you mean?" She's like, "No, you need to wear black trousers, gray clothes. You know, this is too much." I'm like, "You got to be kidding me." So from then on, I just wore black, gray, you know, kind of more dull colors, not popping out. But I think what you're saying, that Overton window, that kind of view of what's normal, what's cool, what isn't cool, what's swag, what's not swag. It kind of applies to different things. I think American fashion is you've seen like Russell Westbrook, the stuff he wears, bro. But people look at that and say, "That's cool," but here you wear that, you're like, what are you doing, man? So I think it is a big part of it, man. I think going back to X-Men, I think you spoke about this Overton window. I think you sort of touched on the fact that I think what makes X-Men, the fact that you have a conversation about politics off the back of X-Men just shows you a lot about what that is. I think it is the outsider, what's normalized, what is the right thing to do. And then going back to sort of Professor X and Magneto, where you have Magneto, who's someone who says, "Okay, I'm an outsider." And I think Magneto, what's interesting is that he's kind of been a victim. Obviously, he grew up in the Holocaust, and he kind of saw what can happen, what humanity can do to people who they're afraid of. And he's like, we have to stand up for ourselves. We need to fight back. We're superior. We have to fight back. Whereas Professor X didn't have the same background, was very much raised, had a relatively good life. And he says, "Listen, let's make peace," kind of the Martin Luther King perspective. So I just want to ask you, just your opinion. Again, there's no right or wrong. What would you do? I think even being a black man, you can even think about Malcolm X, Martin Luther King's approach to that situation. I mean, whose approach would you agree with and which approach would you take and why?
So I think really, really interesting. I'll try and deal with it in stages. So taking those two characters, so Professor X and Magneto, one of the things that people try to say is they actually want the same thing. They're just going about it in different ways. I think I disagree.
You disagree? Oh, interesting. Interesting.
You look at what each of them was able to create, sort of at the height of what they tried to do. For Professor X, it was a school that was for mutants, like gifted children, etc. But the idea was that they would then integrate into the rest of communities and they would be able to add value to people and what they're doing. They went to normal schools. Beast was involved in politics. The idea was that they form part of society. For Magneto, he had the island Genosha, and that was a mutant haven. So that wasn't about integration, that was about segregation. He wanted mutants to be safe by being separate.
Right.
Whereas Professor X wanted mutants to be safe by being accepted and integrated. I think they're completely different approaches. And I think the point that you raised about their background influences, their background experiences being the things that influenced what they saw as the solution, I think that's spot on, because for Magneto, he saw segregation with the Holocaust. So for him, he kind of reproduced that, but just tried to flip it in the sense of saying, look, fair enough, separate us, but we're just going to have our own space and do our own thing.
Yeah.
Whereas for Charles Xavier, he was able to, in a way, integrate himself. So he thought integration is the way.
Yeah.
So I think they've got different backgrounds, and I think they've also got different aims that they're going for. So again, completely separate. In terms of where I fall within it, I think, look, realistically, it has to be integration. That's just my view, because we don't really live in a world where you can segregate in a healthy way.
Yeah.
You know, and even I'll try to base my opinions on what has worked and what hasn't worked in the real world. I can't really think of a situation where like complete segregation has led to like real effective development. And not going like sort of too out there, but I think about like international development for different countries. You look at a country such as China, for example. They had a time where they were like very strictly communist, and theirs was almost a segregation type of approach. It worked for them in the sense that they're now an absolute global powerhouse. Yeah. But what they had to do to their population to get them to that place was quite barbaric and cruel.
Of course.
But then on the other hand as well, you know, then you got the Western powers who did a lot of integration. It wasn't very good. So
yeah, of course. Yeah,
in the real world, I think there's pros and cons on either side.
It's interesting,
Yeah, so do you know, maybe I've even talked myself into a position to say the right answer. But
it's a tough one. I think it's a tough one because looking at X-Men, Magneto is viewed as the villain, right? Obviously, he is classed as a villain because of how he goes about solving the problem. I think what's interesting is that what you mentioned now about it not being this, they don't have the same, because I think maybe the similarity is they both want mutant safety. Maybe that is
that's the
ultimate goal. It's like, because you even watch the films, you see Magneto and Professor X still playing chess, they're still hanging out. It's like, well, I think maybe there's a strong disagreement about how to deal with a very sensitive problem, which I think is another great part of X-Men. I think it even looks at things like, you know, friendship, you know, sometimes not seeing eye to eye with someone. How do you kind of coexist? And I think they kind of coexist, but there's elements of we just don't see the same thing in terms of how to deal with something. Yeah. Right.
And even just jumping in there as well, I think about Magneto being a villain, that in itself is such an interesting point because the comics has him as quite a nuanced character. Yeah. And I think the not X-Men Evolution animated series, but the X-Men 97 and the original X-Men cartoons, they present him in a much more comic accurate way where he's a more nuanced character. He's like an anti-hero. He's not just a flat out villain all the time. Yeah. He's, as you've described him, he's someone who we can truly see. He cares for mutants. He wants mutant safety. There are times when he kind of flips towards saying that we can have integration. Yeah. Or coexistence, peaceful coexistence. And then there are other times when he's just like, no, you guys have clearly shown your hand and you're evil.
100%.
So yeah, like it's
a gray area.
He is, yeah. He's for me anyway. He's not just a flat out villain, you know.
I agree. No, I 100% agree. And I think that's what makes him an interesting character because he's not, because you've seen X-Men Apocalypse, right? Obviously, it's not. I think it's it's not my favorite. It's only let me down a bit, but I think if you look at that film, he actually says, you know what, I want to try and live a peaceful life. I'm going to try and get a wife, have a kid. He's working a normal job. He's kind of, I kind of felt happy. Okay, maybe there's some hope here, right?
Yeah.
And that gets taken away from him because, again, of the same mutant human relations. They kind of end up killing his family. And then he just kind of goes back to his original stance where, and there's even a scene in the film where he speaks to Charles and says, like, I tried to do your way.
Yeah.
So I think he does have that. He's one of the, because a lot of villains there, they just want power or money or whatever it is, right? But whereas with him, I think there is a motivation of, listen, I've seen the worst of what can happen. Therefore, I don't have hope in humanity, because the Holocaust was one of the worst. I mean,
human situations and
horrible, right? So I think from that perspective, there is an element of, okay, maybe I'm looking out for mutants. I'm making sure that my people don't go through that again. And of course, I think his means of how to do that can be, I think that's where the villainy comes in, where he's willing to kill humans or do these things that are obviously evil acts, but with the kind of goal in mind where I think his ultimate goal is not money, it's not power, it's just, I want people to be safe.
Yeah.
But this is how I want to do it. And I think it's a conflicting, or maybe something you disagree with generally. But it's kind of interesting where, because even if you look at Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, they both kind of played a role in where Black people are now. I think both of those approach. If you took one out and you just had Martin Luther King, you needed both of them to kind of inflict some kind of change.
No, I think that's
is interesting.
Yeah, that's the key point as well, and maybe that's the answer that I was trying to get to. Which
Yeah.
In an ideal world, you would have just peaceful integration, peaceful coexistence, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But to make change, like there's going to be conflict. There's going to be things that are not comfortable, and having those difficult conversations is actually, in quite a weird way. So think about it from like the perspective of Martin Luther King, him having those conversations with political leaders and business leaders about integration. His position is actually made stronger when they have him in contrast to somebody who is willing to carry out violence, who is willing to carry out like more aggressive acts, because they say, look, I'm more willing to work with an MLK because there's the threat of a Malcolm X coming if it doesn't work with him.
Yeah.
And it's not just about the individuals, but it's about the perception amongst the Black community in this example. I would say amongst their Black community, because again, slightly different time and context.
Yeah.
They're all looking at what's going to happen for MLK, because it's like, we're given an olive branch. Are you going to accept it or are you going to break it?
Exactly.
And if you break it, then there's going to be a potential outbreak of violence. But if 100%. You accept it, then we can actually start to work on this process of integration.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's hard for that one to work on its own without at least the threat of something else being behind it.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Because another thing I think about is there's almost an element of, I heard someone say, I was watching a video where they were talking about the whole approach Professor X took to, again, let's integrate.
Yeah.
Do you think Professor X is because I think even Magneto would agree that that's the ideal scenario. That's kind of of course everyone wants peace. No one wants conflict, right? It's like, I think that's but would you say Magneto is maybe more realistic? He's more like, is it more of a realistic view of saying, listen, I love to integrate, but it just,
I'd probably say pessimistic.
Right.
So,
that's interesting.
Like
that's
realistic is in the middle, because I think being realistic is like objectively good. On one side of it, you've got someone who's overly optimistic, and on the other hand, you've got someone who's overly pessimistic. And Magneto is overly pessimistic. Charles Xavier at times can be overly optimistic.
100%.
So I
agree.
Which is why together they can kind of balance themselves out.
100%.
To create something realistic, you know.
That's interesting. Yeah. That's interesting. And maybe that's what happened with Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. Same thing. It was the positive. Well, there's hope. Everyone can change.
Yeah.
Everyone will change. But then it's also, because there's a scene in X-Men First Class where they kind of have a back and forth about, I think it's towards the end of the film where they're speaking about Sebastian Shaw and Magneto's like, I'm gonna kill him. I don't want peace. Professor's like, kill him won't bring you peace. There's like this scene where they go back and forth about how the humans gonna react to them finding out about mutants. And Magneto says something where people they'll fear us, and their fear will turn into hatred, which is kind of true, right? It's like it's a valid point to make. Yeah. But then you kind of see where Charles is like, listen, yeah, that might be true, but we shouldn't do that. We should try and have a positive change, which is also that's I think also people want, but it's like is that. I like what you're saying, overly pessimistic. Obviously, it's like seeing the worst in a situation or seeing the worst in someone. And one of them just seeing the best, like having patience, having, this kind of just wait. And I think it's very interesting. And I think, again, it just goes back. I think a big part of it does go back to background, what they've seen, what they've kind of been through, what's kind of sort of helped that change happen. Now, if you look at how we can sort of, because if you look at a character like Wolverine, I mean, in X-Men, you've got multiple mutants, and you've got these different, you got Wolverine, you have Iceman, you have Cyclops. I would personally say that, just looking at X-Men generally, I think Wolverine is the one who's, in terms of one character, in terms of who's hit the mainstream, who's kind of, when people think of X-Men, they just think it's Wolverine, it's the X-Man, right? They don't think of Professor X or anyone else, right? So
as Deadpool said, you are the X-Man.
Yeah, exactly. Literally.
Yeah.
Why do you think that? Why do you think? Because I don't know. I know Wolverine has some experiences with. I mean, he had a horrible procedure with his claws sort of turning to adamantium and so on and so forth. But why do you think he sort of blew up mainstream and it wasn't another character like maybe a Magneto or Professor X or
really good point.
Or because I think they were cool. In my opinion, I think there's much cooler characters in X-Men. Storm, Jean Grey, Cyclops got the bad hand. I think
he just got the goody two shoes.
Yeah,
Boy Scout character treatment.
Exactly.
But really, really good question. I think it comes down to the films.
Yeah,
like 100%, because purely based on the comics, Wolverine is not the central character.
Yeah,
like he's a side character's too low.
Yeah.
But he's a supporting character to Professor X, Magneto, Scott Summers, Jean Grey, Storm. They are the central figures, really, in my view, anyway. Yeah, Wolverine doesn't play a central role when we look at like the overarching stories within the X-Men universe.
Yeah.
Important role, but not like central. So he's been made popular because Hugh Jackman did an incredible job in the films.
Yeah, great job.
That's pretty much what it was. And because most people's exposure to X-Men didn't start with comics, it started with
movies.
The movies.
Yeah.
Where they decided to make Wolverine, like, in some ways the central character of that first film. I think he was, to be fair. He was probably the central character. It kind of just set a trend.
Yeah.
And Hugh Jackman obviously did a good job.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
100%. I would agree. I think especially X-Men 2, right? I think X-Men 2 was Wolverine's film.
Was his film. Yeah.
You had Stryker. You looked at Wolverine's traumatic experience. The flashbacks, and that was Wolverine's film. And it felt like the characters were supporting Wolverine's movie. It was like Wolverine versus Stryker with some X-Men characters. Even with X-Men 3, they made the X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Yeah. Which is, I think that might be my favorite. That and Logan.
X-Men Origins Wolverine's your favorite. Oh, well, interesting. I think that movie gets a lot of
stick. I know.
Yeah. Even Deadpool. I think Deadpool's in that film, right? Oh no. Yeah, I think I've seen some pictures. Yeah. He's got the whole. His mouth is covered. Yeah, it's like, that's what you're known for.
Bro, I know it's so. But I really like that film.
Yeah. Interesting. But I think Wolverine did. I think it might have been because of just the push he got, the attention he received. He is generally got the claws, maybe the abilities he has as well. Maybe just because I think Wolverine, because I've heard some people view Wolverine as an anti-hero, maybe more of a bad, like a good guy, but kind of he's a bad good guy. And I think people maybe like that. He's got an edge to him. He's a bit of kind of like Deadpool. He's not clean.
And you think about his powers, like compare him to a Captain America. like Captain America can like disarm you, and if he's gonna hurt you, he can hurt you in quite like a nice way.
Yeah, exactly.
If Wolverine hurts you, you're dead.
You're finished. Yeah.
Like it's brutal. So and I think that's probably why he's a hero, but he's also like
he's a bad guy. He's got some bad to him. And I think people like that mix.
Like that.
Yeah, that mix, and that's probably why he's blown up. No, which is interesting. Yeah, just out of curiosity. So in terms of your favorite, maybe this could be in a movie, it could be a cartoon, comic book. What's your favorite X-Men story? Just from what you've seen to date, what they've produced. What's your favorite?
Favorite X-Men story were...
It could be a favorite movie or...
No, so my favorite film is X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Right.
The reason for that is I like the way that they track his time throughout history. And it probably is, again, like I can't ignore the context. My first exposure to comic book stories came through X-Men, the first film.
Right.
So being able to see Wolverine's backstory through that, I think was something that it just helped me to kind of get deeper into understanding of who he was as a character. His brotherhood, with, again, it was kind of like a Sabretooth-esque type character played by Liev Schreiber. I liked their dynamic there. Maybe even a little bit of a Professor X, Magneto, Mini, the kind of relationship that they had together. And honestly, I thought it was just well done. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was nice to see him in a much softer light as well. In that he like had his wife and he was in love and he was happy to live calm and peaceful. And then he thought she was killed anyway, and then that kind of turned his character as well. So just seeing him in a much more emotionally vulnerable light in that film, I like that.
Fantastic.
That's on the film level. In terms of comic book stories, House of M is one of the comic book
that's very good.
Yeah, that I really like. And again, it's all about Wanda Maximoff and her power. And essentially ridding the world of again, I don't want to spoil it. Somebody, if maybe gonna make
watch it.
Like it's such a powerful story because again, it just shows. It gives us we have to have a realistic discussion. If mutants were real, how the hell do we handle that? You've got individuals who can warp reality in a second. And whilst it's crazy. Like, and
it's a good point to make,
for real. And you think about the WandaVision series, that wasn't House of M, but it gives you an indication of the kind of things that she could do. So just imagine that, but on a global level. Like she created the hex, and within that, the whole city was just, or the whole town rather, was just in under her mind control spell.
Definitely.
That's nuts. How do you manage that as a society? Like, are we really realistically just gonna say, oh yeah, just let them live, integrate? Like
that's not exactly. Going back to what we mentioned before, I think Professor X I think his stance is good. It's I think morally, we can even say, even spiritually looking at it, it's kind of the right thing to do. But I think it's not an easy thing to do. It's not even sometimes the maybe realistic or
it's not. It's
not a wise, maybe 100% wise thing to do. But let's look at what can go wrong, and what do we do if it goes wrong? Maybe that's the part where he's not. That's not part of his makeup, which I think is very interesting. Me personally, man, I think I love origin stories. You know, I love psychology. I really enjoyed First Class because of the. I think seeing where kind of the Brotherhood came from and where the X-Men came from, and not just that, but why did it happen? I did really like Mystique's character in the film because I think the interesting thing with Mystique, although I didn't love Jennifer Lawrence in the role. I thought she was good in First Class. After that, I thought she just kind of checked out. But I do think in some way she did represent the balance in some ways, right? She did kind of have the Magneto's approach, but also Professor X. She wasn't on one side or the other, and I think she kind of teetered between the two of them throughout the film. And I think that's what a lot of people, I think that's what most people would do. They wouldn't be maybe I'm all Magneto, absolutely. I'm all Professor X. There's that element. Okay, I should be pessimistic now, but I should also be optimistic here. And you can change. That can change. I think she was a great character.
Even just jumping in there, I think that's where the films failed Cyclops.
Yeah.
Because they presented him as pure Boy Scout. Like,
Yeah,
he didn't really
yeah,
have
yeah.
any nuance to his character.
Definitely.
He was just Professor X's
Yeah.
dog.
Yeah.
Like, it was just his pet. Like,
Yeah,
he was
literally.
driving him around everywhere. But that's not how he is in the comics.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
He absolutely wows out at many points.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think there's even one comic book series where he kills Magneto.
Oh, wow,
Like,
wow.
yeah, so his character is incredibly
There's a lot of
nuanced,
depth.
incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
But as you said, most people would bounce between the two,
Of
when
course.
faced with that difficult situation.
Definitely. Like, even now, when I asked you that question, there was an element of where you were thinking, well, yeah, Magneto, I can see why. Like, you were thinking, okay, hold on a second, you had a point, you know? And I think even though you don't want to, like, oh, it's Magneto, I don't want to side with him, but it's like, yeah, you can see where he's coming from.
Yeah.
But also, yeah, and I think people do, I think maybe that is the way to because even looking at black rights and things, looking at Malcolm X sometimes, yeah, I can see where he's coming from, but also Martin Luther King, I can see where he's coming from. To find that realistic way of dealing with it, you need kind of both ends of the spectrum, right? Which is brilliant. So I think just to kind of close off, I think we had a good discussion about X-Men. We spoke about this at the beginning of the discussion where you were speaking about. I like what you're saying about what was the ovarian? Overton window. And what's normal now, what isn't normal now. So obviously in today's society, right? Who would you say the mutants would be? If you're looking at it maybe from that perspective, I mean, who are the outsiders now?
Yeah. Do you know what's funny? I think everyone would view themselves as the mutants. And that's probably quite like a postmodern answer.
Yeah.
Because modernism is about like trying to get to objectivity. Postmodernism, again, from my understanding, is like all about subjectivity. I think everybody subjectively sees themselves as being victimized in some way. You've got straight white men who see themselves as marginalized now because they say the rest of society has gone super left. You've got people who are like gender non-binary, and they would say we are the mutants now. You've got people from the black community who are living in white dominated countries,
right,
who would say they're the mutants. So honestly, I think everybody sees themselves as mutants because of how society is structured now.
100%, man. That I think that's a great point, because I think throughout your life at some point, whether that was in your childhood, whether growing up as an adult, and especially now in this day and age, because I think now more than ever there's so much change happening. Things are evolving, things are changing. I think everyone's felt like an outsider, like I don't fit in. I don't fit in. Like, and how do I deal with this? How do I fit in? I think that's a just a constant maybe issue in society, is that how are people made to fit in? What should we do to fit in? What is there available to make people fit into society? You know, and I think that's very powerful, man. I think it's interesting, and I think it's interesting just looking at that. Is there any advice you'd give to maybe those outsiders on how to fit in, or how have you dealt with maybe fitting in, or what would you say?
So identity is incredibly important, and it's often today like we take identity from things that, as you've pointed out, are constantly changing. You know, like if it's based on your race, defining what blackness is seems to shift all the time. You know, like if you vote conservative, you're not black. You know, if you speak a certain way, you're not black. You might be black, but then you can't hold blackness as part of your identity because there's certain things that don't adhere to what people are saying.
What does it mean to be black? 100%.
The lines on sexuality are continually changing as well, and like I guess the approach nowadays is just fluidity. So that's not a stable identity structure anymore. For me personally, it's like not always, but in my adulthood, it's been like my Christian faith, which is much easier to boil down and define because it's not based on something that, again, look, Christianity has the way that it's been carried out, some people, it has adapted throughout time. Like what it looks like now, what the church looks like now isn't what the church looks like 200-300 years ago.
200%.
So on some levels for the better, and some levels for worse.
100%. Yeah.
But it's the central elements of faith are so important, and those are things that have been here from time immemorial. Again, even in the Bible, it speaks about how like righteousness by faith is linked back to Abraham, which goes before even the law was put in. And when we're thinking about a central figure like Abraham in the Bible, this is an ancient person, like truly ancient person, like thousands of years ago, and linking back to his belief in God as being a model for how we are to be made right before God. It's like a very simple, but like historically stable thread that we can still draw on today.
100%.
And that's something, again, for me personally, that's been really, really crucial. So,
Yes, I love what you're saying about stability in the sense of what you're putting your identity into, something that's stable, something that's constant. Because I think there's so much change that, and I think it just links, again, Mystique, great character in X-Men First Class, big thing with her was the insecurity, her identity.
Exactly.
And I think that's why she sided with Magneto, because Magneto had the stance where, listen, you're a mutant. Take it, what he was telling her, you're a creature, take your clothes off, just be mutant and proud. And proud. And I like that part of X-Files. What we dealt with because we live in a very insecure generation, right? People are very insecure. And I always tell people this, that the word insecurity, it's just what you put your security into.
100%.
And I think a lot of people put their security into things that are, I think, things that change. Like, for example, if you care so much, what are people saying about me? People say different things. People's minds change. So I think people then are very insecure. They're kind of not stable in terms of their, just the confidence they have in themselves or what they believe in, their identity. They don't know who they are. There's that identity crisis that you have a lot of people now. I think what you're mentioning with yourself, you've chosen Christianity, God, sort of where you feel there's an element of stability in terms of what your identity is in God, right? Now that sort of helped you, and which could potentially help other people. But I think now, especially in this generation where there's so much change happening, that can be an issue. That can be an issue, man. I think just last question to wrap it up, just more to do with the X-Men. I think what we were saying, the beautiful thing with the X-Men is the idea of outsiders trying to fit into society. Now the X-Men are going into the sort of MCU.
Yes.
Knowing what we know about X-Men, what we like about it, I mean, how do you feel about them going to the MCU? How do you see that working out? How do you want to see that play out? Do you think that's going to work out, or what are your thoughts?
One of the things that we mentioned earlier was about the whole like Fox owning it and then Disney owning part of the MCU. Disney's bought Fox and now they brought X-Men into the MCU.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I'm not gonna lie. I'm very that's top line emotion is just excitement because I just want to see these stories on the big screen. Fundamentally. It's amazing reading it, but seeing elite level actors playing these characters and being able to bring them to life, that like nothing is going to beat that for me. I'm a film guy first and foremost. What I'm maybe concerned about is, and again without sounding like someone who's kind of like bashing Marvel over the head, I don't want them to just let them be fun stories. We don't need to overdo it. Like it's ironically because we've spoken about how important X-Men is politically. The reason why it works is because fundamentally they are fun stories that anybody can engage with. But when you make it
too serious,
like politically driven,
social commentary,
that's when you lose the hook.
Exactly.
Because their value is, I can just go and watch this and have fun. But hold on, it's made me really think about this.
Exactly.
But if you're
thought-provoking,
if the thing at the front is you need to think about this and this and this, it's just going to put people off. Yeah.
Exactly.
Just make some good fun films. That's
exactly. I think this is a great thing about The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight can go. You can go and watch it's a great Batman film, Joker fight, but there is so much depth about morality, about choices, about what it means to be a hero. Humanity is hard. There's so many things so there's layers to the film, right? It's like, on the surface, I love the Batman film. I love Batman and Joker just fighting, but there's so many layers to it. And I agree with you. I think that's the pull, is that sort of this is just a great comic book movie, great action, great characters, pulls you in. But then you watch, oh wow, they're dealing with the characters I like are dealing with this and that. One of my favorite comic films, again, Batman Begins. Great film, but then it deals with fear, how to overcome problems, mental health. You know, therapy. There's so many things in it, but that's not on the surface why you're watching the movie.
Overcoming grief as well is a huge part.
100%, 100%. So I think then you leave kind of entertained, but also kind of inspired and something to think about when you go home, right? I think for me, I was interested to hear what you think about it, but I'm also very excited about X-Men. In terms of changes, I was watching a video a few months ago about Magneto potentially changing to be an African American character because of the Holocaust being so long. But you can make him a character where he was a victim during the Civil Rights Movement, and that kind of being his motivating factor, maybe the triggering incident with him. So I think with me, I think that that's a change. Maybe I would like to see something fresh, something different. I think also, I'm not sure about recasting certain actors. I think they should. I'm happy with them recasting. I think we've seen. You can't have Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart. Yeah,
just change it all.
Yeah, just change it all. Start fresh. Yeah, just go into the fresh. Because I think if you try and, I don't know. I think these actors are quite old. They've been playing these characters since 1999, 1998. Bro, it's time for them to stop, man. I think it would be nice to see a new Professor X, a new Magneto, a new Wolverine. You saw Henry Cavill in like stuff like that, man. I think it would be cool to see a fresh take on the characters, man. But yeah, man, I think that'd be cool. Yeah. Kwame, thank you for coming and talking about X-Men. It's good to have you, bro.
Pleasure, bro. Thank you for having me
as always. That's Kwame, guys. We'll be back soon with more videos about film and entertainment. And we hope you have a good day. Please subscribe, like, and comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts about what you think about the X-Men. Who your favorite characters? What have you learned about X-Men? What do you think about the whole idea of outsiders and how to fit in? Do you feel like an outsider? Just comment. Let us know what you think. And we'd love to have a discussion with you guys in the comments. But please subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Take care.